This back half of today is going to be our advanced topics portion of the conference. And to start, we have a panel about crypto compliance with a specific focus on laws and regulation. One thing that we found interesting is have you seen crypto's rise to fame over the last couple of years has been the government's power struggle against it. And for the panel, we have JoAnn Holmes, Greg Johnson, and Justin Daniels. JoAnn is an advisory committee member for the Blockchain Law for Social Good Center and currently serves as senior legal advisor for the Atlanta Blockchain Center. Greg is the CEO and co-founder of Rubicon, which is a digital marketplace for waste and recycling, and Justin works in corporate M&A at Baker Donelson and since 2017 has served as the co-chair for the firm's blockchain and digital assets practice. The panel will be moderated by Brent Gillett, who runs a law practice that has a focus in digital assets. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
To sort of kick things off, I had just generally kind of prepared a statement about kind of where the recent events that have happened that I think are creating sort of a knee-jerk reaction from a regulatory standpoint. We have a lot of bills that have been introduced both in Congress and Senate, and we have SBF putting his sort of thoughts forward, and I think at the end of the day, we have a lot of constituents who are self-interested, and by comparison, I think a lot of us like to think of crypto as the ultimate free enterprise. So we have a lot of tension between free enterprise and protecting retail investors. So kind of with that, we're not going to debate policy as much today. We'll do a little bit of that, but really going to try to do a deep dive into some topics that might impact everyone here who's thinking about maybe joining a crypto venture, starting a protocol. And with that, we'll kick it off, with the question, are digital assets securities? Should they be? This is something that I have to deal with day in, day out with all of my clients who want to start funds. And the question is, should they register as investment advisors? Are the funds that they're managing investment companies? And it's a tough question. It's kind of the backdrop and the big, sort of the white elephant in the room in my practice. But Justin, I'll kind of turn it over to you with that question. What are your thoughts? And what's the current framework that we use now to determine if a digital asset, should be characterized as a security?
Well, thank you for the easy question to start out. Lob it in.
Lob it right in there.
Throw in the grenade. I think the place we want to start when we're talking about our digital assets or a security, what exactly are the security laws designed to do? The security laws came about in the 1930s as a reaction to the run on the banks that helped precipitate the Great Depression. And the idea with the securities laws is they want to make sure that investors have the information that they need to make an informed decision on whether or not to make an investment. So bringing ourselves forward about 80 or 90 years, those were when those laws were built or enacted, and then the major test for whether something is a securities is a 1940s case called Howey. So whenever you hear the Howey test, it goes back to a Supreme Court case from the 1940s. So they have a four-pronged test that they use. Investment of money in a common enterprise with the expectation of profit due to the efforts of others. And so before we get into some legal analysis that might be a snooze fest, the best way to think about this is the Web3, NFTs, anything you want to create, it's all about creating a sense of community. So what is a way that you create a sense of community to incentivize people to want to be part of it? Economic, financial. The moment that you think about doing that, a gong should be going off in your head saying, oh, from a legal perspective, I might need to think about securities or commodities? And that's the test we have today. And the challenge is from a Gary Gensler's perspective, is I think he wants all of the exchanges to sign up to be regulated by the SEC. And the challenge that you have is in 2017, the SEC came out with the Dow guidance, where if you read it, they give you a bunch of factors and tests. It's like in a real charcoal gray area. But the SEC's view is he's like, I have yet to see many tokens that I would not call a security. But my point is, you need to think about anytime you're trying to build out a community using financial incentives, that should trigger in your mind, do I need to have my economic model vetted by legal counsel to figure out where do I stand in those 4-part tests? Because it's really, at this point, a risk-based decision for you.
And do I beg for forgiveness later and just do it? So, as I spend a lot of my time on the business side increasingly, as a co-founder of a new L1 blockchain, as a guy that's actually, a partner in a couple of crypto funds, and, you've got to take calculated risks sometimes. And, because we see those who ask for permission sometimes just getting, like since 2013, the Winklevoss twins have been trying to launch a crypto ETF. And it was just again denied. So waiting has a great cost. I think in many, to a great degree, it compromises innovation. So I think there's no easy answers here, but I think talking to an attorney to help try to make an informed decision about risk is, the way to go. And I'll let JoAnn or Greg, if you want to chat a bit about that. You do.
I'll just, because I'm not going to infringe on any legal opinion here because I'm not the attorney on the stage, but I'll observe a couple of things. And before we do that, coming in after lunch, you all deserve a round of applause on a Sunday to hear about compliance and legal in a meaningful way. So that's the MVP status right now to have anybody here. Show of hands, how many of you actually own crypto? Anybody own any crypto? Okay, that's a safe bet. Other show of hands, how many of you are interested in being involved in the ecosystem? Maybe you're developing projects and thinking about developing projects. Then you actually are in the right place at the right time today, okay? This conversation impacts absolutely everybody, whether you choose to accept it or not, in this room then, right now, that put your hands up. And if you might put your hand up in another couple of months or so forth, it probably impacts you too. The crypto winter, okay, I refrained from saying it until I couldn't anymore, okay? I just hate the expression, but this period that we're in right now, yes, it's a crypto winter, it also has unleashed the endless summer of crypto regulation. For you surfing fans out there, you'll get the drift, okay? But it's been an endless summer of crypto regulation trying to sort out what I think the counselors here are going to frame up for you as being really important decisions. And we have a huge opportunity. We need to pay attention and get involved as a community as these debates are happening in real time for everybody right now. This is the time to engage in the political debate and the regulatory debate before it is too late. And as somebody who spent most of my time in the securities industry, in the wealth management space and so forth, we haven't seen anything like what we're about to see with digital assets and when people start really weighing in. One of the refrains you probably have heard of a lot is this notion of we just need regulatory clarity. Of course, what is not said when people say that is we want the right kind of clarity that serves our purposes. My argument would be careful what you wish for. We're deeply involved in DC and our work at Rubicon Crypto because it's important to have responsible regulation. And I can assure you it is coming, and it's going to be coming perhaps a lot quicker than we would have thought as an industry as a result of the negative downturn that we've had. So I'll leave it up to Joe to continue on with the exploration of the definition, and then I might have a thought as a layperson maybe later on.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to second the applause to all of you for being here after lunch. And I love that so many of you are in crypto. I would ask you, based on the fact that you're clearly courageous, please help dispel some of the FUD that you're hearing from people who have not taken the initiative that all of you have taken to be here and to be studying this space, and frankly, to be leveraging the opportunities that are going to come from you learning about this space. I would just add briefly from what Justin said, if something is not a security, there's a real risk that it's a commodity. And there are a set of regulations that have to be complied with from that side as well. Also, here in the United States, we have a highly litigious society. And so it might not be the SEC or the CFTC who's coming at a project. It might be somebody who was disgruntled on your team, someone who feels like they were defrauded or got cheated in a deal, and they might find a plaintiff's attorney to come at you because you might have been doing business yourself and not with some sort of LLC or corporation to protect you. And so oftentimes when I'm advising my Web3 clients, I'm saying the risk is not always from the regulators. They have a finite amount of resources, but plaintiffs' attorneys make their living by finding the gray space in the law and going after deep pockets. We have examples of every members of DAOs being sued. We have examples of the CFTC notifying every member of a DAO through a chat bot that they considered them to be in violation of law. So taking the time to understand how the law and regulation impacts what you're doing, there are people whose entire profession is to find your digital wallet and trace back to somewhere where you had to go through anti-money laundering and know your customer with a Coinbase or a Kraken or a centralized exchange, so you can be found online. That is not at all to dissuade you from what you're doing, but to help you be pragmatic and make more informed decisions.
Thanks, JoAnn. And let's touch on a topic that you just brought up with digital assets being characterized as commodities. What is the significance of that? The CFTC has jurisdiction to regulate commodities that are traded on a levered basis. And so this is really tricky because a lot of us who are really into trading may be trading perps through BVI entities or using IP addresses that are outside of the US to get access to these products that are really innovative. And here we have Sam Bankman-Fried lobbying for FTX to be able to bring these kinds of products and more depth to the markets here. But technically, I guess one question is if I'm just trading a digital asset that is only a commodity, like I think everyone's in agreement now from a regulatory perspective that Bitcoin is a commodity. There's recently a lot of question about ETH no longer being a commodity, but being a security. Gensler said some things about that recently. So, when do we, what are you comfortable that, everyone is sort of safe if we're just trading assets that are only commodities? And I think, the test really is decentralization. If you don't have a group of active participants who are really sort of driving the day-to-day business decisions, strong arguments can be made. That's one of the elements. There's other elements, but that's one of the main elements that I think would make an asset a security. And the more decentralized the asset, the more people that are involved in governance, the more likely that it will be characterized as a commodity. And that's sort of where, as a founder of a new L1, we're like really latching onto that thesis, and it's kind of scary that ETH now is even being considered, no longer a commodity. And then, on the financial side, trading commodities on a levered basis, that's definitely an issue. But a lot of these new acts and bills that are being proposed would actually bring commodities, even non-levered commodities, under the jurisdiction of the CFTC, which I think could be really problematic.
Seems to me, for the benefit of this audience, would it be helpful to discuss with everybody why Bitcoin is not considered a security? So Bitcoin is not considered a security. So you remember in your first year business class where they talked about people who were first movers in an industry? Think of Amazon, think of Coinbase. So Bitcoin, basically, and Ethereum before it went from proof of work to proof of stake, were basically grandfathered in, meaning the government, the regulator said, hey, you've become sufficiently decentralized. But here's the rub. Any utility token, any kind of digital asset, does it start out automatically decentralized? It doesn't. But in those cases, the government just said they're sufficiently decentralized, but that doesn't apply to all the other tokens that are coming after it. And I think what's interesting to note about Ethereum is when they went from proof of work to proof of stake, you went from something that was very decentralized to something that's somewhat decentralized, but not as much as it used to be, because proof of stake is all about the staking for the validators, And that's why that issue has now arisen. And so one of the interesting things we were talking about in the green room is, remember what I said before, securities laws are all about having information. So think about if you used open source in a Discord channel to make public how you're going about creating your coin, and that information is publicly available to investors. Well, now you're in a position to tell the regulators that I've been open and transparent with. What's that?
Choke up on the mic.
Choke up on the mic. Okay.
Lou Rawls style, right up to the top. Right there.
Well, I twisted myself in the wind. Anyway, the point is, what other ways are there out there to be more open with information to the point of how you then are able to differentiate or distinguish yourself from being centralized or having an asymmetry of information, which are the public policy goals of securities law? That's how Bitcoin and Ethereum initially were able to become commodities and not considered securities, because they were sufficiently decentralized. Basically, they moved first and got the benefit of doing that, but everything that's come since doesn't have the same benefit.
And one of the tricky parts is, launching a new protocol today is, how do you start? You got to raise money. I mean, you're starting a business, and JoAnn, how do we start? How do we start raising money in compliance with laws when you probably are conducting a securities offering, with the goal ultimately of having a decentralized asset that will be bought and sold on DEXs? So this is, I think, really the heart of the issue, and it's one of the things that I'm struggling with, my clients struggle with, and there's not a lot of clarity, which is creating a lot of problems.
So the honest answer is we don't know. And the reason why we don't know is because there's a lot of discussion amongst the heads of regulatory agencies who are charged with making decisions and communicating to the public and hearing from the public around how we want our government to serve us. Then you think about things like the law in the United States and the law in Europe, for example, is designed for long arm reach. So if you have a design where you're trying to circumvent US regulators, if you have US people involved, then you're possibly right back in the same position of needing to be in compliance with US law. So US law right now, in terms of securities, does have some exceptions to the disclosure requirements and the frankly very expensive process that you have to go through to be in compliance with the SEC mandates. One of those is this beautiful thing called working with accredited investors, which effectively means relative to an ordinary person, you've got to be wealthy, right? And then there's another exception to the rules around crowdfunding, which, if you think of Kickstarter, that was one of the first examples of crowdfunding that caused our government to evolve our regulations to allow retail investors to have an opportunity to jump into some of the promising enterprise that they couldn't participate in before the law evolved. So what I would say is, I've been practicing law for 23 years. I manage digital assets and intellectual property in 140 countries. If I'm telling you we don't know, please speak to an attorney. Don't think that you are beyond the reach of the law getting to you, because when you start to be successful, that's when the problems arise. You don't want to find out you had a risk when there's a lot of money on the table, if on the front end you could get some advice that can help you design on the safer side of building a savvy business.
So what JoAnn said, I'm going to further that with, let me ask everyone a question. How many of the people in the room have used Zoom? Do you remember back when Zoom first started, did you even need a password to use Zoom? Why? Why was Zoom able to scale so well? Because it was what? Really easy to use. But because of that, they created the Zoom bombers, the hackers that are out there. That is, to me, the number one problem in crypto. But where I'm heading with this is, then it came out they were sharing user information with Facebook. So that got them sued under California law, which has some pretty robust privacy laws. So at the end, they settled with the regulators for $85 million. And it was at that point they said, oh, we need to bring in the security and privacy professionals. And the point of that story is that goes to what JoAnn is saying. And I think the exact same thing, my personal opinion, is what will happen with OpenSea, but they're willing to do it because if they get big enough, they'll just look at it as a cost of doing business.
And, unfortunately, to your point, there are a lot of bad actors out there now. And there's a lot of folks sort of hastily pushing out code to be first to market. And the governance isn't well thought out in certain cases. Sometimes it is. And that's really why, we had Terra Luna meltdown, as I mentioned, others. And so, at this point, maybe we'll talk a bit about KYC and the need for it. And a lot of folks think KYC can kill DeFi because the goal is to avoid censorship and to enable anyone anywhere to take out an insurance policy and not have all of the bureaucracy. If you're a farmer in Thailand and you've got a small farm, you don't have access to insurance. DeFi can solve that problem. And I think that's amazing. And that's just like one use case. There's so many. But I think that to the extent that we start building moats, if FTX is successful in building its moat with some of the policies, because they want to be the KYC gatekeeper to many, and then once you're in, you can do whatever you want in DeFi. But so that's, I think there's not like a great solution, but there's a lot of innovative companies working towards addressing this issue, and hopefully we'll see them interact with the regulators, and law will be will have sort of respect for the innovation that we're trying to make happen.
So I have a thought on that, and let me just jump in on a couple of points here. I think we need to understand that for the foreseeable future, that while this whole discussion that we're having was predicated on an amazing white paper that's 14 years old right now, right? That's the reason we're in the room, and it's all evolved from there, and who could have foreseen what this would have evolved into? The reality is we're extremely early, and it's not a TradFi versus DeFi winner take all. In our lifetime, we're lucky enough to be around while we're literally seeing the notions of money and medium of exchange permanently transformed. There is no question about that. But what we have to come to terms with is it's going to be a period of hi-fi. We are going to be in a world of hybrid coexistence, like it or not, for some time. And I think the entrepreneurs that are in the room must come to terms with that, and must come to terms with the battle that is being waged right now for Middle Earth. No, the battle that is being waged for regulatory supremacy right now. It involves a number of federal entities, but it also involves states. And so this is not some nebulous discussion. Wherever you are headquartered, wherever you're doing business and so forth, there's also state rulings, state politicians that are entering into the fray that can absolutely make a big difference on what we're seeing right now. One of the things that fascinates me and drew me to this industry is the incredible ironies that abound. Right? That you have this incredible notion of the future of we have technology, it's sufficient enough, the network is big enough where we could actually do away with third parties and central banks and things of that nature. And yet, in my opinion, it is this regulatory discussion, sorted out mostly, that will lead to the largest expansion of the digital asset industry that we've ever seen. And the two are directly connected. It will not happen without it. And that's the import of the conversation. So I'll just chime in there, and I have a couple of thoughts, maybe if there's time later on to kind of come back to, that I think are relevant to the audience, but I'll turn it back, or to Joe, to you, please.
I want to ask, so I'll be up front. I'm the parent of a 22-year-old who just graduated from Stanford, a lot like Georgia Tech, really smart people all around you. She said to me, "Mommy, how do I get rich?" I don't think that's a bad question to ask. How many people in here are wondering, how do you build wealth in Web3 and with crypto assets? Why are you not raising your hand with the lovely dark blue jacket? Don't you want to make money? Okay. I'm just wondering, why is anybody's hand not raised? Because wealth equals choices. That's the reality of the country that we live in. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I love making my clients money. I think that innovators and creators should make money. And what I want to hear from my friend Greg is, how do you make money?
be in this, be in it now, be in it for the long term, and be thoughtful about the types of projects you're getting involved in. I think one of the things that we saw 22 years ago with the advent of the internet was a whole bunch of nonsense kind of ginning up all of the incredible value that was added that was coming out of that first era of adoption in the new world. And I think, to me, how we try to allocate our clients' assets in the ecosystem is everything to do about what are the big picture solutions. So much like some of the venture funds you've heard about before, when we think about asset allocation, we're trying to figure out what are some of the projects that have really interesting utility. Imagine we have blockchain technology. So blockchain, it all comes back to blockchain, right? So imagine everything in the world, all the data, all the IP, all the identification, it's all going to be there. We're fascinated by all of the innovation, to give you a niche, if you will, that is going on around optimizing data storage, optimizing the way that blockchain functions, and how easily it's lubricating back and forth within the system. That's just one example.
How much is lack of regulation a roadblock for you in your practice? Because, how many of your clients or potential clients say, well, when it's more regulated,
So, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to Justin? Go ahead.
I was going to say the lack of regulation comes in if you want to have products where your customers are enterprise customers because they have an entire compliance department and they're not going to do business until they have some better understanding of regulatory clarity. I remember having a conversation with the CMO of Pepsi and asking my opinion. He's like, yeah, I have so many lawyers who are up my, not letting me do stuff. And it's because of lack of regulatory clarity. And that's why hopefully one of the things that will come out of this latest, interregnum period where we have this crypto winter is to get some better guardrails. But one other thing that I'm going to say is, regulation isn't the true problem to get mass adoption. It's dealing with cybersecurity and the hacks. And so given everybody in this room, my ask of you is be thoughtful about the code. Don't just rely on some code that's out there that has bugs in it, because you might have a trustless consensus protocol that's awesome, but I won't use Aave and Compound and some of the other ones because I don't want my stuff getting hacked because a smart contract gets hacked because they use buggy code. And if we don't get the security stuff from a cyber perspective under control, you won't get mass adoption because people aren't going to what? They aren't going to trust it.
Justin, I couldn't agree more. And I'll just tell you that if you talk to people in DC that are on the benevolent side of the hacking space, they will tell you that any self-respecting, even bad acting hacker, they almost feel guilty with how easy the industry has made it to access these exploits. And how easy.
And some of these, we just saw the Mango debacle where, is that, unethical? It's, is it, the code is such with so many of these protocols that, it's really more of a trading opportunity, an exploit. It wasn't meant in code. Code is, some people say code is law, but I think there's a lot of bad, if that's the case, there's a lot of bad law, that is going to, create massive losses. And so that's where I think there's a really interesting opportunity to try to have, code sort of embrace policies and ethics, to a great degree, and I think that will help folks sort of rally to make crypto what it can be.
The issues in terms of exploits are not just specific to the DeFi or crypto side of things. My work focuses more so with NFTs, the metaverse, and DAOs, and that's a real issue. Some folks know, for example, of the Aku project with Micah Johnson. There was a problem in the smart contract. By no means do I have any reason to believe that team had any ill intent. In fact, they behaved with great integrity in making sure that their team was made whole when that exploit happened. But the point is, across the Web3 space, across the tentpoles, even if we go into gaming, I think it was earlier this year around the time of NFTLA, there was an exploit with Axie Infinity, where it was literally an issue of a bad password amongst those who had multi-sig access to their treasury. So from NFTs to DeFi across the Web3 space, making sure that you have quality code, you have smart contracts audited is smart business.
And DAOs following the rules. Like some of the DAOs, the one that you mentioned, was trying to create a platform to trade commodities on a levered basis. Like that's not, allowed, U.S. persons aren't supposed to be able to do that unless these are entities that are regulated as FCMs by the CFTC. So it's also...
You're talking about UkiDAO?
I think, wasn't it UkiDAO?
Yeah, it's UkiDAO that the CFTC went after.
So my understanding is they were, there was a predecessor firm that, they got slapped on the wrist, $250,000 fine, not a bad price to pay for, being an innovator. And then somehow the baton was passed to UkiDAO, but that was still a continuation of, trading assets on a levered basis, which we regulate. And so I think, DAOs need to be cognizant of like the mission of the DAO, and is it evading you? If you're going to have U.S. persons involved and you can't know your client, that's a problem.
So I'm glad JoAnn brought up Axie Infinity, because I think this story will really resonate with the audience. So when Axie Infinity is a play to earn game, it became the most popular play to earn game in the Philippines. You mint an NFT using crypto. But here's the thing that happened is, what is the critical element of a startup? You want to get to market with what? Fast, with speed. And that's characterized the entire bull market up to now. So what Axie did was, as we all know, Ethereum is really fast, right? To process transactions. No, it's not. It's slow. So what did they do? Well, they had to figure out, hey, we got to process all these transactions fast. So they built a layer on top of it. But in order to process transactions fast, a decentralized network with all these nodes, that slows you down. So they had 9 validators. They were only supposed to control 4, and a 5th was somebody else. But what they didn't do right was that 5th validator was a DAO, but there was some way that Axie could actually control that. So once the hacker got in and they hacked that and they had all 5, it was open season. Because why? Quick to market.
No pun intended.
Scale quickly.
I think we wanted to have some questions, but we might be at, do we have, this gentleman here.
Yeah, so one of the things I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about, and we only have a couple minutes, so I apologize, are your thoughts on intellectual property in respect to Web3? How some of the concepts like molecule DAOs, fractionalized NFT structure is going to come into play. And then additionally, how concepts like data ownership itself, live streaming data and drip funding will start to change the landscape of intellectual property.
That's the after hours breakout.
I'll do the Cliff's Notes version. The key issue with IP has really related to NFTs. All of Web3 is IP. But with NFTs, collectors have not given enough consideration to the trademark or the brand in the collection. They haven't thought about the copyright. If what the token relates to is digital art, for example, or a PFP, they haven't thought about the copyright law or the contract, which is a license, okay? So why does that matter? Bored Ape Yacht Club is a brand name. The images of the apes are all protected under copyright. And how you know what you can do with your ape is a contract. So those pieces of understanding from the creator level then tell the collectors what they can do with the asset that they have not purchased. In most cases, they've actually licensed it. There's a securities law question related to fractionalization, so I'm going to defer to Justin on that.
From what we're seeing with the SEC, if you're going to start fractionalizing NFTs, you're likely to get a love letter from the SEC. They've been very clear about that, and I would steer clear of that. But the thing you really have to pay attention to is what JoAnn said, because a lot of the licenses that are floating around out there, because they just get them from whatever website, they're not very good licenses. So now you have concerns over ownership. It's interesting. There's a project going on with the do no evil kind of licensing that's out there. So I want to see some things that I've been trying to work on around using technology to maybe have decentralized storage that has a license that's decentralized, it's stored, you can reference it, you put it in the metadata as part of the NFT and the ERC 721 token, and you start to think about how can you use technology to try to solve some of these legal issues innovatively, which I think in this period of time we're going into, we have more time to think about what we're doing than just to throw something out there to scale quick.
I'm just wondering what the panel's thoughts are on the tornado patch situation. Coders can try to protect themselves, and how that writing code could be a crime.
So we're just beginning to, we got a long way to go to unpack what's going to happen with that. for sure. First of all, there are a lot of amazing reasons why that's a good thing to have out there available, from the philanthropic side of things. If you're a very successful person and you want to donate anonymously, there are a lot of really practical use cases. And I think what we found in our new world, the unintended consequences of that is the fun we have with dusting and what that's going to do. So I think we're getting pushed off, but that's a really good question. There's a lot to unpack with that for sure.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.